Testing.
What we're going to be doing right now is called Kriya, the tearing of the ribbon. It's traditional for mourners, immediate family, to rip their clothing when there's been a loss. This has been passed down through Lois's family through generations. In our current form, we wear a black ribbon. This is a reminder for the individuals who are mourning, as well as for all of us, that when we see someone who's had a loss, that we know that their life is irreparably changed, that they should be gentler on themselves, and that we should be gentler with them as well.
We're going to begin with one of Lois's favorite psalms and saddest psalm, Psalm 23, which is in your leaflets. I'm going to invite Cantor Frank up to recite it in Hebrew, and then we'll read together in the English.
Adonai roi lo echsar binotesh yarbetzeni amem menuchat yanachaleni nafshi shovel yancheni b'maglet tzedek l'man shemo Kam ki elech v'kitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shiftecha u'mishantecha emayinachamuni ta'aruk lefanai shulchan neked surai v'shantam v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yamei chayai v'shaveti bevet Adonai lior rechiyami.
Please join me in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And a poem in the memory of Lois. It's called The Intention. Healing is both an exercise and an understanding, and yet not at all the will nor of the intention. It is a wisdom and a deeper knowledge of the daily swing of life and death in all creation. There is defeat to overcome and acceptance of living to be established, and always there must be hope. Not hope of healing, but the hope which informs the coming moment and gives it reason. The hope which is each man's breath, the certainty of love and of loving. Death may live in the living, and healing rise in the dying. For when the natural end is part of the gathering and of the harvest to be expected, to know healing is to know that all life is one, and there is no beginning and no end, and the intention is loving. Today is a really hard day for our larger community, for the world, and most especially to Lois's family, whom she loved with every fiber of her being. First, we surround Barry with love. What a romance you had. What a wonderful, loving relationship that taught so many of us about loving. From the moment you found one another, not knowing where that journey would held, and went off in the yellow pages in search of Miller, because that's all the information you had. Her father, and luckily her father's name began with an A. And to the children, to Pam and Naomi and Tammy and Elisa, how lucky you were to have this individual as your mom. She was not only someone who shone a light to the wider world and whose effect I personally feel a lot of gratitude for all the things that she did in this world, but she loved you unconditionally, as I know that you'll say and that I could feel. That's a very lucky thing, and it's not something that all of us get from our mom or for our dad, and how lucky you were. To her sons-in-laws, Andrew and Matthew and Brett, and of course to the grandchildren. You may not realize how lucky it was to have such a grandmother, but in time you will, if you don't already. To Jacob and Rachel and Zachary and Addison and Austin and Devin and Lila. So grateful that in this period, even as we're saying goodbye to her, that she had the time to spend with you when she was healthier. And that's a real blessing that we can never get back and we'll always appreciate. We surround you, all of us gathered here in love. Each of us had our own relationship with Lois, some professional, some familial. And for those of us that knew her, were touched by her even in small moments, she will always be a part of us, and she will always be a part of our community. We're going to do our best today to say goodbye and to collect those memories and to share them. And it's our duty from this day forward, because we don't have her strength anymore in this world. And what a pillar of strength she was to go out and to do good deeds, to share stories of her. And hopefully those stories will have stories and stories beyond that, so that Lois's memory will be a blessing not just for our world today, but for the world in the far future. So we offer strength to those that are going to speak today, and we know that you're representing Lois's life in the way that she deserves. First, 3 of her children, Tammy and Elisa and Naomi, invite you up together to share some words.
There's perhaps only one thing better in life than being one of Lois's 4 daughters. You may be thinking it. It is being one of her 7 grandchildren. She loves each of us so completely and showed it in big and small ways every single day. When we were kids, she planned extraordinary celebrations where she focused on the small details to make the person feel absolutely special. From birthday parties including pony rides, hay rides, and apple picking, to 4 beautiful and unique bat mitzvahs, to my dad's swearing in as the supervisor at the Amherst Museum, where she specially arranged sleigh rides, hot chocolate, and glimmering star cookies. We even suspected she had something to do with the beautiful snowfall that day. For one of Lila's birthday parties, which included petting live bunnies, my mother carefully carried a large box of the most delicious bunny-shaped cookies on the airplane, so each guest could take home a unique treat. My mom's gift was to make every one of us feel honored and special. She did this by being there faithfully. She cheered at every softball game and tennis match. She attended every school play and performance and came up with creative and original ideas for projects dating all the way back to my 2nd grade presidential campaign. Her slogan, "For a sweet year, vote for Tammy," delivered with a lollipop, certainly clinched my win. My sisters and I have been discussing all the milestones and events my mom and dad attended for their grandkids, and considering whether she'd been present at the birth of every grandchild, we concluded that indeed she had, if you count her slightly late arrival for Addison. My parents had been visiting Naomi and Matt in North Carolina and returned home because Addison wasn't due for 3 more weeks. As soon as they landed in Buffalo, they got the call that Naomi was in labor and flew back the next day. Maybe this is why 6 months later, for Devin, she was actually in the delivery room, standing next to Brett, holding my hand. And when she couldn't be present, like on Valentine's Day, she sent every family member, and even our children's caregivers, her love by mailing each of us our own giant chocolate heart with her name on it. Some years, she'd also send us a warm hug in the form of cozy pajamas, often all matching.
To our delight, she was often a proponent of eating dessert first, because otherwise you may not have room for it. As kids, this meant trips to Anderson started with custard, and breakfasts could be a bowl of vanilla ice cream covered in chocolate syrup and peanut butter sauce from Friendly's. On her trips to Raleigh, birthdays were marked with her favorite bananas Foster, and on most other special occasions, we'd all scan the menu for her favorite, creme brulee. She loved to take us shopping, and we loved going with her. She held firm to the motto, when in doubt about which one to buy, get both. And 4 kids meant getting 4 of everything. She also loved playing mahjong with her friends, and she taught me and my friends how to play. I will miss our Monday night phone calls, listening to her recall with enthusiasm which hands she had played that day. In addition to her family, my beautiful mom was passionate about many things. By example, she taught us that when you discover something you love, you don't just dabble. She threw her considerable energy and every part of herself into her beloved projects. When we were kids, she started planting flowers in the yard. Over the years, I'm sure a lot of you noticed that every inch of grass was transformed into a lush, eye-popping garden that rivaled Giverny Monet's garden, her inspiration. Her beautiful combinations of flowers, all meticulously labeled in Goldfish Pond, were often praised by the patients walking into my dad's medical office. She also made trips to each of our homes and helped us build and tend our own gardens. This included mailing us bulbs to plant in the fall, pulling our weeds in the spring, and taking trips together to local nurseries. Many, many years ago, she lovingly transported her grandmother's now 100-year-old peonies to her own yard and even planted a cutting of this same bush at Tammy's house in Maryland. Just a few months ago, she gave me a container of seeds that she had saved from her flowers and told me to plant them in my yard. I wish I could ask her again what they are because I can't remember, but I will wait for her answer to come this spring when they grow. And she didn't stop there. She earned a Master Gardener certificate from Cornell University's Cooperative Extension, and she became involved and eventually president of the Forest Stream Garden Club. She also worked with high school students to transform a vacant lot in the city of Buffalo into a beautiful neighborhood garden. My mom also inspired me by being a talented knitter and quilter. In the early 90s, she made each one of us a colorful, warm sweater. We were all the recipients of gorgeous quilts in the early 2000s. And over the past couple years, she knit and I assembled what amounted to 10 full-size knit blankets, and even a few smaller ones for our dogs made from the scraps. And she used the softest yarn. And this may have been the downside of having so many kids and grandkids, because once word got out about her latest creation, everyone eagerly got in line. And my mom had to keep making more and more blankets because in her generous and true fashion, she could not say no.
Since we were kids, my parents dreamed of having a beach house. My mom always told me how much she looked forward to our annual beach week in North Carolina. She loved gazing at the ocean, long walks alone or with my dad, curling up with a good book, looking for that perfect seashell, and engaging my kids in beach-themed crafts, which she had thoughtfully planned in advance. I smile now recalling how some days she would eat crab, which was her favorite, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In the past 15 years, she fell in love with sea turtles. She took us to visit sea turtle hospitals. She adopted sea turtles. She walked the beach scouting out their nests and woke many nights to watch them hatch by the light of the moon and journey to the ocean. There are so many other attributes we admire, but I'll just mention a few. Her kindness and generosity were unrivaled. In particular, she planned life-changing trips she knew we would always cherish and remember. As a family, we traveled to Israel for Elisa's bat mitzvah. My mom took Tammy and I on a whirlwind 2-week European tour for graduation presents, and she took Elisa to London to see theater. It was also important for her to take Pam's family to Israel for Zachary's bar mitzvah, and 5 years later to do the exact same tour with my and Tammy's family to celebrate Addison, Devin, and Austin's bar and bat mitzvahs. She loved parasailing in Israel with Zachary so much and was determined to share that same experience with our kids 5 years later. As the guide was helping Addison, Devin, Lila, and my mom onto the parasailing boat, this was like a year and a half ago, he looked at her and he said, "You're going?" And she said, "Yes, absolutely." Her and Lila then enjoyed sailing up over the Red Sea together. She was our faithful and constant sounding board, listening patiently and giving the support and encouragement to work through whatever issue we were facing. Lastly, she showed us what it means to value and hold tightly to true lifelong friends. Many of you are here today, Mom's closest friends and ours. We want to thank you for being there to show your love for her and your support for us.
I'd like to invite up Andy and Pam.
There'll be a little bit of overlap from what you just heard. In the 1990s, there was a sales slogan that consisted of 5 simple words: go big or go home. I'm guessing Lois never knew that slogan, but I do know that these are words that she lived her life by. If you're not sure, I'll read the meaning and those of you that knew her best can decide. Go big or go home is an exhortation to go all out, to put all of one's effort into an enterprise, to experience something to its fullest, to be extravagant. It is a philosophy to be bold. In 32 years I knew her, I never knew Lois to do anything halfway. When she started a project, took up a new hobby, or started a collection, she dove in head first, went above and beyond, and put every ounce of her being into it, or she didn't do it at all. Pam and I would like to offer some examples. When you went to a dinner that Lois made, you weren't served a meal. You were treated to a feast, a gourmet feast. It was never as simple as a protein, a starch, and a vegetable. There were always 6 or 7 things to choose from, and everything was delicious. The most frustrating part was always realizing there was something on the table that you were gonna have to skip because there was simply too many choices. Lois loved accommodating everybody's favorites, and she made what everyone liked. When Lois gave a gift, it was over-the-top generous and was always accompanied by a thoughtful and heartfelt card. This was not to outdo anyone or show off, but she did it with a pure heart filled with love for the recipient. This is a little bit of a repeat. Just before the Persian Gulf War in 1991, Lois took up knitting. Most people, upon learning a new skill, would be satisfied to make one thing, maybe 2. As the war unfolded on CNN and Scud missiles landed on Tel Aviv, Lois got her nervous energy by knitting sweaters and hats for the whole family. I call them Scud sweaters. Sometimes knitting through the night. The war lasted only 32 days. God only knows how many sweaters she would have churned out if it had gone on longer. A perfect example of going big. Over the years, Barry has taken our two boys to well over 100 Buffalo Bills football games. Lois only took them each to 1 game. Of course, they were both Super Bowls. In her professional life as director of the Holocaust Resource Center, she was responsible for bringing an exhibit about the life of Anne Frank to Western New York. Her goal was to have as many school children as humanly possible tour the exhibit. Her plan was ambitious, maybe even a bit too ambitious, but everything she so meticulously planned was executed perfectly in the spring of 1995. Over 20,000 school kids were bused to the exhibit. To witness the buses coming and going and kids going through the exhibit was a sight of beauty. She went really big with that exhibit, and it really paid off. This exhibit may have been the crowning achievement of an amazing educational career.
Besides seeing the beauty in people, my mom loved beautiful things in general. And when she found something she really liked, she kept on going until she collected the whole set or as many as she possibly could. On my parents' honeymoon in Bermuda, they bought a piece of black and white Wedgwood. Over the years, it became a hobby to find more and more pieces. Once it was discontinued, their efforts intensified. My parents went to auctions, watched the Channel 17 auction, and went to antique shops in search of new additions. It was always fun to see them add a new bowl or vase to their collection. Whether it was Wedgwood, Swarovski crystal ornaments, Hummels, giraffe figures, or Murano glass clowns, my mom took great pleasure in displaying them all around our home. As Andy mentioned, my mom didn't do things small, but big. 8 weeks ago, my mom looked as if the end was near. My sisters and Rachel all flew in. The mood was very somber. A few days later, she showed some improvement. We would have been happy if she just wanted to go down and sit in the living room, but she happily announced that she wanted to go up to the casino in Niagara Falls. And to the casino, we all went.
Perhaps nowhere does this slogan apply more than to the creation and maintenance of her garden. After her human relations, her garden was the love of her life, her passion. When I came into the family, and this is a repeat, I'm sorry. When I came into the family, the Weinsteins had a full front lawn. Lois decided to plant some flowers in a 1-foot garden right next to the walkway. The next year, she went about 5 feet more into the lawn. Every subsequent year, she added a few more feet. Within about 6 or 7 years, the majority of the front yard was transformed into a beautiful English garden, leaving only a little patch of grass. It was fun watching her every spring, anticipating the return of the different species of flowers, like a long-lost friend returning to town. There were days in the spring when Lois and Barry would spend the entire day tending to that garden, dumping soil, pulling weeds, planting new flowers. It always made me laugh to see Lois covered head to toe in dirt, traipsing up the stairs to go clean up. It wasn't just the flowers she loved. She loved staring at the bees, flying in and out of them, knowing that they were doing their jobs as pollinators. She decorated her garden with footpaths, a trellis, which she insisted on calling a sukkah, a fish pond, and signs and rocks with inspirational sayings. One time she decided to hang a birdhouse and took great joy in seeing birds flying in and out of it, but felt bad that there were birds that were shut out of using it. Her solution was to keep adding birdhouses until they all had a home. Her garden was the biggest, grandest one I've ever seen. She definitely went all out when it came to being a wife and a mother. 4 daughters by the age of 29, a big family. She gave unconditional love, as you've heard, to her family and was paid back the last 7 or 8 weeks as Barry and her daughters put their lives on hold and worked round the clock, taking loving care of her in her hour of need. I always appreciated that Lois treated me like a son, never a son-in-law, and in return, I always loved her like a mother, never a mother-in-law. The example she set of going big in your lifetime endeavors is an example we should all strive to emulate. The last 4 years have been tough for Lois. There was a knee injury, followed by surgery, and then the horrible disease she battled robbed her of the ability to do a lot of the things that she loved to do the most. She's now gone to a different home, and I have no doubt that she is no longer sidelined by the earthly health issues. She's back to going big. I'm guessing that as we sit here, she's laying out plans for a football field-sized garden that will dwarf the size of the one she had in this world. I have no doubt that it will be the most beautiful one ever. Rest in peace, Lois. We will love you forever, and you'll forever be in our hearts.
Now we're going to hear from different grandchildren, first from Rachel, and then we'll have Zachary.
Mimi was kind, generous, caring, smart, and beautiful. But to me, it was her love, passion, and authenticity that made her such an incredible person. Everything Mimi did, she did with 110% of her heart. She wanted to share the things she loved with the people around her. She loved flowers in Monet's garden, the beach and sea turtles, feng shui, the fish game at the casino, creme brulee, lobster, and Louis Vuitton. But most deeply, she loved her family. When it came to her grandchildren especially, she was the most selfless and generous that any person could be. It didn't matter what else she was doing, she was always excited to spend time with us, whether it was talking on the phone, getting lunch, going shopping, getting manicures, or supporting us at sports games, recitals, award ceremonies, and graduations. Mimi taught me not to take life so seriously. Her motto was, "What happens at Mimi's stays at Mimi's." Growing up, when she would watch Jacob, Zachary, and I, she would let us eat dessert before dinner, spray whipped cream right from the can into our mouths, and go midnight swimming in her backyard. This past Thanksgiving, all of her grandchildren spent time interviewing her. I asked what the most important lessons she learned in life were, and her answer was simply, "Don't sweat the small things." It was true. She never cared about inconsequential things like breaking a dish or spilling on the carpet, except maybe when Docky accidentally shrunk her favorite cashmere sweater. She was often over the top, but in the best way, a way that would instantly make you smile. Her gushing reaction to anything exciting always lasted over 5 minutes and was completely authentic. And no matter what, she always acted with the most pure and loving heart. Many years ago, she gave me a star necklace, and inscribed on the back was the acronym TYFLM. Obviously, this jumble of letters made no sense to me. Mimi couldn't even remember what it stood for when she had made it at the time. And we laughed about it.
But later she pulled me aside and told me it stood for Trust You Forever, Love Mimi. This is just one example of many that perfectly illustrates her personality, sometimes a little quirky, but always acting with the most thoughtful intentions. From a young age, Mimi taught me the importance of girl power. She was a role model and my biggest cheerleader. She was the person I turned to for advice and who I thought of first to share good news, accomplishments, or just funny day-to-day stories with. I am incredibly blessed for the relationship I had with her, and I already feel her absence and miss her infectious laugh, wisdom, advice, love, and support.
Thank you all for being here today. As I began writing this, I came to the realization that for almost all of the moments I've shared with my grandparents, it is impossible to talk about one without including the other. That's what happens when you grow up 2 minutes away from them. At one point in my life, Mimi and Daki were probably my best friends. We would have Shabbat dinner Friday night, and after my parents went home, Jacob and I would stay to play poker and blackjack. On Saturdays, we went bowling and got lunch, usually Ted's. Finally, on Sundays, we watched the Bills, whether we were at the game or ordering pizza and wings at home. But today, I want to talk and focus on my amazing grandmother, Mimi, the greatest grandma anyone could ask for. There were so many special things about Mimi, and I want to share 3 of them with you. The first was her cooking. Every Shabbat dinner, she would make a delicious meal, and usually she had to make a separate one because someone, me, was a very picky eater. My favorite thing that she made was matzo ball soup. It was her grandmother's recipe that was passed down to Mimi, a story I always enjoyed hearing. Mimi only made it a few times a year, but always on Rosh Hashanah and Passover. I couldn't wait to finish the first part of the Seder and get to the meal, because that meant filling up on Mimi's soup. Going back to how I was a picky eater, I refused to eat any soup with green stuff in it. So Mimi made a special pot just for me where everything was strained out. A few weeks ago, I made her soup recipe for the first time. I brought it up to her when she was lying in bed, and she said it was delicious, which definitely made me tear up a little. I knew she was proud of me for the job I had done and for carrying on the tradition of her grandma's recipe. Watching her eat my soup and love it is a moment I will remember every time I make it in the future. The second quality was her generosity. My other grandma, who is here today, has a refrigerator in Florida covered with magnets. One of them always catches my eye. It's a picture of 2 young grandkids running to their grandma with the following quote: "Mom said yes and Dad said no. Grandma, will you break the tie?" With Mimi, it was the following: "Mom and Dad both say no. Mimi goes and buys it for you anyway." She did this for all her grandkids, and when accused of spoiling us, her justification was always, "That's a grandma's job." Mimi's generosity toward all her family included toys, electronics, clothing, plane tickets, concert tickets, trips to sporting events such as tennis tournaments, Super Bowls, and the World Series, bar and bat mitzvah trips to Israel, and so much more. Every member of Mimi's family got to experience something from that list, and I feel confident in speaking for all of them that we are so, so grateful to have shared those memories with Mimi. Finally, the most important thing Mimi did for me was give her love and support. Since middle school, tennis has been a huge part of my life. I wanted to be a professional tennis player, and Mimi was there to support me from the very beginning. Because of Mimi, I was able to take tennis lessons and work out with a sports trainer. Although my tennis career was cut short, I know Mimi enjoyed watching every high school match I played as though I was a pro playing on tennis's biggest stage. She was by far my biggest fan. Also related to tennis, Mimi and I shared a special bond, our love of Roger Federer. I started watching all of Federer's matches in 2012, and somewhere in the next 2 years, Mimi started too. I never asked her to become a fan, but with Mimi, if something was important to you, it became important to her. I would be up watching Federer at 3 a.m. when he played in Australia, and I would get a text from Mimi with her analysis on how he was doing. She always promised to take me to Wimbledon to see him play. In 2017, when she wasn't physically up for a week in London, she delivered on her promise and sent Jacob and I on the trip of a lifetime, where we got to see Federer play on center court not once, but twice. The tournament in Australia is beginning in a few weeks, and it's going to feel weird not discussing the matches with her. I always hope Roger wins, but this time I hope he can win for Mimi. Mimi, I love you so, so much. I enjoyed every second spent with you and every memory shared with you. Saying goodbye to you on Saturday was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I'm going to think about you at every birthday, every graduation, and hopefully someday my wedding. I know you will be there with us at every celebration and family gathering in our hearts and minds. I am looking forward to someday in the future that I have grandchildren of my own. I'm going to make them your soup, probably spoil them, and tell them stories about their amazing great-great-grandmother, Mimi.
We have a microphone set over here for one of Lois's, her lifelong friend, Susan Edelman, who's going to share some words about their friendship.
As everyone has said, lots of duplication, but that's because we were all so blessed to be able to share the experiences with Lois. Thank you. That everyone has mentioned. I was honored to be asked to speak on behalf of Lois from her closest friends, a group of us who have shared the joy, love, passion, creativity, strength, and beauty of Lois for over 60 years. The first word that came to me when asked to speak about Lois was love, in terms of our friendships, as was just described about how she felt about her family. She felt the same way for her friends. Lois was a deeply loving person who was always there for her friends and their families to share in their joys, sorrows, and achievements. Celebrations, they were unbridled with her enthusiasm that was always, as was said, contagious and never ending. She was there without ever having to be asked. She was always just there. She did this through her selfless acts of kindness, always unexpected and never wanting any thanks in return for what she had done. I speak on behalf of myself and my family, as well as Cheryl Orlick, Joan Weissman, Suzanne Barney, and Noreen Toby and our families, in recalling the ups and downs, joys and sorrows, adventures and celebrations we have all shared through our journey of life together with Lois and her family. We maintained our friendship over distances as Lois and Barry moved away from Buffalo for several years, and how happy we all were when they returned to live permanently in Buffalo. Cheryl, Lois, and I have shared birthday celebrations for over 70 years, with our birthdays falling only a few weeks apart. And on February 3rd, we will be celebrating Lois's 74th birthday That is what we would be celebrating. We shared pregnancies and maternity clothes, with the three of us giving birth to daughters around the same time, all with names beginning with the letter A: Allison, Elisa, and Amy. Our families spent great times together. The families of all that I mentioned, the Barneys, the Weissmans, the Tobys, the Orlicks, and all of our family. In addition to Lois's accomplishments as a community leader and executive director, she had many other exceptional talents and interests that we, as her close friends, were lucky enough to share in and learn about. She was passionate as an organizer, planner, and teacher. Parties. We all recall the wonderful Labor Day parties Lois and Barry had for their friends and family. The baseball games across the street, very competitive. And the large yellow school bus we all piled into to go see Michael Jackson together at Rich Stadium. As a teacher, Lois taught us about many things besides what a true friend is. She taught us about flowers and gardens, and we were so happy and proud to attend her garden club shows and luncheons that she put so much effort into. When she became a master gardener, the achievement of creating the Victory Garden with city youth and her passionate love for her grandmother's peonies, which has been talked about, she would give to each of us with great pride, and they, if you ever visit, continue to grow in the front yard. Her fish that were mentioned, we all watched and heard about for years as Lois created her fish pond. It got bigger and bigger each year, and she cared for her fish through many of their various ailments with great love, as if they were her children, giving them antibiotics and covering them with netting to protect them from the swooping cranes that would try to remove them. Feng Shui, as was mentioned, Lois loved learning about Feng Shui that she would share with all of us and could not wait to learn about the new symbol of the Chinese New Year and what elements and colors to incorporate into her house, garden, and of course, Barry's office. The beach house and her love of the turtles. Once she and Barry had the beach house, and she always dreamed of having, we all learned more about turtles than we ever imagined there was to know. Their incubation period, hatching, and keeping the lights out at night to not disturb them. Lois loved the turtles. Mahjong. While I never played Mahjong, Lois always spoke about the fun she had playing Mahjong with her friends and the various groups she played with, and attending a tournament in Arizona with Joan Weissman, Iris Weinstein, and Doris Hewson. And more recently, how appreciative she was of her group coming to her house to play, to make it easier for her so she could continue to play, and for Doris picking her up when she could not drive. Football, as was mentioned. Lois loved football, and I had the pleasure of sharing many Bills games with her, and of course, as was said, who else but Lois attended 2 Super Bowls with their grandsons. Adventure. She watched and she heard about with great joy the various adventures we watched and heard about with great joy, the various adventures Lois shared with her children and grandchildren, traveling across the country and across the globe, and collecting shells on the beach, visiting India and Israel. She was adventurous and fearless. Barry. Where is Barry? Barry. What can we say? Her main passion, besides her children and grandchildren, was, of course, Barry. Having been friends for so many years, we all shared in the experiences with Lois of Barry becoming a doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, school board member, legislator, and town supervisor, and Lois's involvement, and consequently all of ours, in endeavors including her excitement on election night and her great pride as she watched Barry being sworn in. Lois was a very special woman and very dear friend. Kind, intelligent, gentle, determined, sincere, considerate, compassionate, and generous. In her own quiet way, Lois touched so many of our lives and the lives of our families. We are who we remember, and we will always remember our dear friend Lois, the example she set for us, what she stood for, and what she taught us about friendship, caring, and unconditional love. We will miss you very much, our dear friend.
I'm going to try this and see how it goes. About 2 weeks ago, Lois and I were together alone. She was tired and bedridden. She said to me very quietly, "Is it okay if I go?" I said yes. She placed a kiss on a finger and put it on my lip. I placed a kiss on my finger and put it on her lip. Then I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead. Then I put my forehead on her lips, and she gave it a kiss. That's how we said goodbye.
Let's take a moment to take all these words in. What beautiful stories. Lois's life was shorter than we would have liked, but it was so full and complete every moment. I'll just share a couple of reflections that I heard from the family. I've really gotten to know the family intimately this last few weeks, and particularly this week. It's an amazing family and a testament to Lois's love. In this week's Torah portion, we say goodbye to our patriarch Jacob. His life has been up and down. He had love in Rachel, but a lot of unanswered questions. And as he dies, he draws his family near. And some of the messages that he gives to his children in particular are not the nicest. He teaches us how to say goodbye, but I think Lois took it to the next step. She had this time, and I met with her a couple weeks ago. She knew that the end would come, and it was pretty much as predicted. But she took that time to say goodbye in the way that we should say goodbye. And she not only taught us about life, but also about death. I think about her early age, where she admired her parents, particularly her father, in the pharmacy. And I was in a pharmacy today, and I thought that was right. And how on Christmas Day she would hold down the fort, and there weren't many other employees there, and she was in charge, and that's where she learned about community and life and love. And she tossed that to her daughters as well, who also had a chance to be in there. Let's think of her full, complete life, the many moments in our own lives. I'll think about her as my kids attend schools in this area, knowing that we don't have a Christmas concert, we have winter concerts, knowing that we have off for Yom Kippur, and knowing that that hard work that she put in to make sure that we, this little tiny people, the Jewish community here locally, could feel pride and love in our heritage and never should be embarrassed by that. Barry handed me about 20 copies of this wonderful book, 1981, but still relevant. May we continue to teach her stories, continue to love our life, live our life according to what she gave us, with a full heart, unafraid, willing to go out and do what is necessary to make this world better, and to always remember what is important in life. May her memory always be for a blessing. I'd like to invite everyone to rise, and we're going to turn to the middle prayer, the El Maleh Rachamim. This is the moment we pray for her soul, to finding loving embrace with her ancestors, her Hebrew name, Leah bat Avraham Verut.
ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן.
Please join me in the English. Lord, full of mercy, who dwells on high, find fitting rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah and the heights of the holy and pure, who shine like a glow of the firmament for the soul of Lois M. Weinstein, who has gone to her eternal world. For we pray in memory of her soul, may a resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter her in the shelter of God's wings forever. May God bind her soul in the bond of life. The Lord is her inheritance. May she rest peacefully upon the resting place, and let us say,